If you've been on the internet since Saturday night, then odds are you've seen the actual video footage, or at the very least the aftermath of the Jake Paul-Nate Robinson fight. Leading up to the fight, it seemed everyone was talking about Mike Tyson's return to the ring. However, since the fight, it seems evident Jake Paul stole the show with his second round knockout. Although both Tyson and Jones impressed boxing fans and casual viewers who tuned in, it seems Jake's performance was the biggest takeaway from it all. Well, his knockout and the post-fight interview, in which Paul called out two professional MMA fighters in Conor McGregor and his jiu-jitsu partner, Dillon Danis. Now, it's fair to say Danis and Paul have been going back and forth on social media for at least the past year, with both fighters calling each other out and taunting one another. But McGregor, he may not even know who Jake Paul is. With his sights set on his January 23rd fight with Dustin Poirier, I don't think McGregor cares too much to respond to Paul, nor will he entertain the idea of fighting him. That being said, it'd be an easy fight and a decent payday, so maybe he would consider it. Today on LBQ, we're asking what if Jake Paul fought Conor McGregor. Before we get into things though, guys, be sure to hit that like button or else Jake may come knock you out. I don't know, he did to Nate, he might do it to you too. Now, when looking at this matchup, it doesn't seem very competitive, and with all due respect to Jake, I don't see how it could be. Conor McGregor has held 3 titles in the UFC, 2 of them simultaneously, and has a professional MMA record of 22 wins and 4 losses. Of his 22 wins, 19 of them were by knockout, and of his 4 losses, well, all of them were by submission. When looking at McGregor's boxing record, he sits at 0 wins and 1 loss by knockout. However, it's important to remember, McGregor's first and only boxing match was against one of the greatest boxers of all time, Floyd Mayweather, who needed 10 rounds to finish things off with the Irish showman. Jake, on the other hand, has an undefeated boxing record of 2 wins, 0 losses, with both of his wins being knockouts. The main difference between Conor and Jake's boxing records, however, is who they fought. Conor, as previously mentioned, went toe-to-toe with one of the best to ever do it, Floyd Mayweather, who has a record of 50 wins and 0 losses. Jake beat an Ensign Gibb, who, with all due respect, I didn't know of prior to the fight. A YouTuber who hasn't really posted much since losing to Jake, Gibb didn't put up much of a fight, and considering how this was both Jake and Gibb's first sanctioned fight, well, it wasn't too surprising to see Jake win. Jake's most recent win, which is definitely more impressive than his first, was against Nate Robinson, a former NBA star. Again, nothing against Nate, but really comparing Jake and Conor's opponents, it seems like night and day here. Nate Robinson trained for maybe 4 or 5 months leading up to his very first fight, which was against Jake. Floyd beat 49 other professionals in sanctioned fights on top of all the other amateur and exhibition fights he won prior to taking on Conor. So when comparing professional boxing records, although Jake is 2-0 and Conor is 0-1, it doesn't seem to matter all that much. We gotta look at who they were fighting and how things played out. Conor going 10 rounds with one of the best to do it is much more impressive than Jake knocking out a YouTuber and a retired NBA athlete, both who had no fighting or boxing experience prior to the fight. Jake going into the fight had experience, as he not only fought with his older brother growing up, but he was on the undercard of the first KSI Logan Paul fight. Even though Jake and his opponent Deji wore headgear, Jake still had an advantage over his next 2 opponents, who had never been in a boxing ring prior to their bouts with Jake. We also can't ignore Conor's mixed martial arts record, which, although unlike boxing, allows for fighters to use more than just their hands, is still incredibly impressive. Considering how the majority of Conor's wins have come from striking, with almost all of them being knockouts, it's safe to say he packs a punch. Conor has been boxing since the age of 12, but didn't start a career in fighting until 2008 when he made his MMA debut. And even though Conor is a brown belt in jiu-jitsu, his striking is definitely where he impresses the most. He's one of the best strikers, if not the best striker currently in the UFC. He's one of the best fighters the UFC has ever seen, and the man has made history more than once. Standing at 5 foot 9 inches tall, 155 pounds, and with a 74-inch reach, it seems this fight would be a piece of cake for McGregor. Paul, on the other hand, stands at 6 foot 1 inches, weighed in at 189 pounds for his fight against Nate, and has a reach of 76 inches. Now, odds are if these two are going to fight, they'd fight at a much more even weight. A 155-pound fighter going up against a guy at 189 just doesn't make sense. Even though I still think Conor would win at that weight, it simply wouldn't happen. Instead, they would need to agree on a weight. However, given that Conor has previously fought at 170 pounds and is believed to walk around at 170 or 180, it's possible these two don't need to cut that much weight. Light heavyweights in boxing fight between 168 to 175 pounds, while cruiserweight could be anywhere from 175 to 200 pounds. Now, assuming Jake walks around closer to maybe 200 pounds, I don't think it's so crazy that these two agree to fight at cruiserweight, which would give them the option to sit anywhere between 175 and 200. Odds are they would both fight around the 180 or 185 pound mark, which for McGregor would be a little heavy, but definitely doable. For the Floyd fight, Conor went down to 153 pounds, and although he tends to fight around 155, if his walking weight is what sources believe to be, fighting at 180 wouldn't be so difficult. If anything, the biggest concern for Conor fighting at a heavier weight would be him gassing out, but Given who he would be fighting, odds are things wouldn't last more than a round, maybe 2, but even that's pushing it. And this isn't to discredit Jake Paul in any way. As much as I'd love to run my mouth, if he and I were to be in a ring together, he may have the advantage, although I think I could hold my own. But against Conor McGregor, one of the best fighters the UFC has ever seen, well, I don't see this one going very long. Similar to how Jake made his fight against Nate Robinson look like a sparring match, McGregor would easily take down Paul, who would most likely try to keep his distance from Conor. With a 2-inch reach advantage over Conor, it would be much more difficult for Jake to keep his distance, especially compared to his fight against Nate, who had a reach of just 70 inches. This means when Jake was going up against Nate, the YouTuber had half of a foot distance from the former NBA star when they were both throwing hands. This made things quite easy for Jake as he used his reach advantage to land shots on Nate without having to worry about Nate giving him a shot back. Now if you watch the fight, odds are you saw for the most part, Nate not only looked incredibly unprepared, but he was also grabbing Jake a lot. Aside from this, when Nate tried to attack, he would lead with his head, and this gave Jake plenty of opportunity to take advantage of the new boxer. The exact opposite could be said for Conor, who not only gets hit in the face for a living, but is also quite agile when he needs to be. So as previously mentioned, it seems if these two actually did get into a boxing ring together, McGregor would make a large sum of money in a very little amount of time. Just like Jake handled Nate Robinson, who clearly looked like he was in his first boxing match, Conor would do the exact same thing to Jake, even though Jake would be stepping into the ring for a third time. And as much as this fight seems unrealistic, it may eventually happen. Conor really doesn't have anything to lose, as he'd be able to train for any upcoming UFC fight he had, while also preparing for the fight against Jake Paul. What I'm saying is Conor could train for his real fight, which would also help him beat Jake Paul, because really, he wouldn't need to train much for the boxing match. And it would just be an easy few million in his pocket, assuming that Conor would not only get a large purse to fight in the first place, but also a massive percentage of the back-end pay-per-view buys. Conor is one of the biggest draws in the world, especially in the fight world. He's broken numerous records in both the UFC and sports history, with his fight against Mayweather being one of the biggest sporting events of all time. It's believed he made over $100 million when all was said and done. Now, I wouldn't expect Conor to make anywhere near that for his fight against Jake. In fact, I'm not sure he'd even make more than $10 million, and that's being generous. But I can tell you right now, if this fight were to happen, I'd pay the $100 to watch it, even if I knew it would last just one round. And I think a lot of other people would too. Aside from the fights that would be on the undercard, which would not only include professional bouts, but may also see Logan fighting another notable celebrity or real fighter, I think most people would be happy just to see Jake get knocked out by Conor. With all the trash talking and the fact that he could back it up by winning his fights, it seems Jake has done a great job becoming the guy everyone loves to hate. And he doesn't seem to mind because you can hate the kid all you want, but it's just increasing his net worth. He's laughing all the way to the bank. However, prior to this fight, Jake may set something up with McGregor's jiu-jitsu partner, Dillon Danis, as it seems that's been the plan all along. Following his knockout win, Paul was being interviewed and asked, "What's next?" His reply, I quote, "I've been training my off the past year. I'm taking this seriously. I have a long list of opponents I want to fight. Conor McGregor, Dillon Danis, I will knock both of them out. There's my brother Logan Paul, Austin McBroom. I want to be in the sport for a long time. I'm in love with it. Why not?" That's quite the jump. Going from two pro fighters in McGregor and Danis to two YouTubers and his brother Logan and Austin McBroom are two different conversations to be had. But of them all, it seems given Jake's recent win, a fight against Dillon Danis may be next. Taking a Twitter following the fight, Danis called out Jake, tweeting out, I quote, "You just fought a retired NBA reject. Be careful what you wish for, little guy," at Jake Paul. Now, given that Danis is currently fighting in Bellator and would likely want to make the transition to the UFC, getting his name out there by fighting one of the world's biggest YouTubers who has over 20 million subscribers may be the right move. Even if it would be an easy fight for Danis, who is a jiu-jitsu black belt, the publicity he'd get alone from fighting Jake would be worth it. All I'm saying is keep an eye out. Now, as always, guys, let me know your thoughts on this one down below. Who do you think should fight Jake next? And if Jake fought Conor, how long do you think it goes? And why do you think Conor wins? Let us know in the comments down below. For now, let's do some comment replies from the video. COVID curious here, so now what? Andrew Albamer said, "I'm just going to delete all my coronavirus-related memories after it's all over." Shouldn't do that, because you gotta learn from mistakes. I mean, not to say that this is necessarily your fault, Andrew, but I got a feeling like maybe you're the one that started this whole thing. No, I'm joking. That's a total joke, Andrew. I'm sure you're a great dude, and I wish you all the best. Anonymous said, "If there is a vaccine, I'll just wait at least 2 to 3 months to see if the vaccine gives you any bad symptoms." That's the whole point of the clinical trials, so they've done that. I think the vaccine has kind of been going around for like maybe 2-3 months now, and I think that's like the timeline of like, hey, no bad symptoms, now we can give it out. But the issue with that is, you know, like 3 to 6 months, you're only gonna know what happens to the people that were in the clinical trials 3 months after you take the vaccine, assuming that you get it right now. You get what I'm saying? So, hey, to each their own though. I wish you all the best, stay healthy, stay safe. Mr. James said, "I'll believe it when I could travel again." That might be a while. That's, I don't know. But I mean, it depends on the country. Like, you know, I think you can just go to the States if you want, to Florida. Like, they don't care. The borders are open, so come and go as you please. Whereas Canada, we're a little more like, whoa, 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 whoa. Hold on there, guy. Let's see some maple syrup in your passport, eh? I'm just joking. All right, guys, I've been your host, Jared Bronstein, and we'll see you in the next one. Bye.